The world remembers my friend Bruce as a supernova. He was a star that burned brighter than any other, illuminating the sky with his power, his speed, and his revolutionary ideas. His films captured the imagination of millions, showing them a new kind of hero. He was the dragon, a symbol of strength and defiance. But, the light that burns twice as bright burns half as long. When he was taken from us so suddenly on that confusing summer day in 1973, the silence he left behind was deafening. It felt as if the world had stopped spinning, leaving us all in a state of shock and disbelief. An official report was released, but it did little to quiet the whispers. The headlines were filled with speculation and controversy. They spoke of curses, of hidden enemies, of dark secrets that surrounded his final hours. For those of us who knew him, who saw the man behind the legend, this noise was a painful distraction from our grief. We had lost a friend, a mentor, a philosopher who was just beginning to share his deepest wisdom with the world. The world focused on the mystery of his death, but the real tragedy was the interruption of his life's work. He had so much more to teach, so much more to give. His journey was far from over, and its abrupt end left a void that could never be truly filled. I was more than just his butler. I was his confidant, his sparring partner in late-night philosophical debates, and a quiet observer of his genius. I saw the toll that fame took on him, the constant pressure to be more than human. After his passing, the atmosphere in Hong Kong became unbearable for me. There were disagreements with his family, well-intentioned people who I felt were steering his legacy in a direction he would not have wanted. They wanted to preserve the icon, the fighter. But I knew he was more. He was a thinker, a poet of motion. I could not stand by and watch his profound teachings be flattened into a simple caricature of a martial arts movie star. My heart was heavy with unspoken words and a loyalty that now had no anchor. I felt a deep responsibility to honor the man I knew, not the myth the world was creating. The arguments were quiet but firm, rooted in different interpretations of his will and his spirit. It became clear that my path had to diverge from theirs. I had to leave. I needed to find a place where I could process my loss and protect the essence of his philosophy in the only way I knew how, by living it. And so, with little more than my memories and a profound sense of duty, I walked away from the life I had known, leaving the noise of Hong Kong behind me. My journey to America was not a simple flight across the ocean. It felt more like a pilgrimage, a shedding of an old skin. I chose to travel across the vast, empty landscapes of the American Southwest. The desert became my sanctuary, a place of stark, silent beauty that mirrored the emptiness inside me. Each day the sun would rise, casting long shadows across the sand, and I would walk. The physical exertion was a welcome distraction from the turmoil in my mind. The heat was relentless, the horizon seemed to stretch on forever, and in that immense space, my personal grief felt both significant and incredibly small. It was a humbling experience. I carried Bruce's words with me, not in a book, but etched into my memory. A goal is not always meant to be reached, he once told me. It often serves simply as something to aim at. My goal was not a destination on a map, but a state of being. I was searching for peace, for a way to reconcile the past with an uncertain future. The desert offered no easy answers, it simply was. It was harsh, and it was beautiful. It demanded respect and patience. It taught me to conserve my energy, to pay attention to the smallest details, and to find life in the most unlikely of places. I was learning to adapt, just as Bruce had always taught. There were nights when I would sit by a small fire, the stars above me more brilliant than any I had ever seen in the city. In the flickering flames I would see his face, hear his laughter. The memories were vivid, sometimes painfully so. I remembered our conversations about philosophy, about the nature of the self. All knowledge, he used to say, ultimately means self-knowledge. In the profound silence of the desert, I began to understand what he meant. Stripped of my role, my identity, and my home, I was forced to confront the man I was, without the shadow of the dragon to define me. It was a terrifying and liberating process. After weeks that felt like months, I emerged from the desert, not healed, but changed. The raw edges of my grief had been smoothed by the sand and the wind. I had walked through my own personal wilderness and had come out on the other side. The journey had been a physical manifestation of my internal struggle, a long, quiet meditation. I had not found all the answers, but I had found a new resolve. I would not let Bruce's true legacy fade away. I would carry it with me, not as a burden, but as a guiding light, and I would find a way to share it, to plant its seeds in new soil. My travels eventually led me to a small, dusty town that seemed forgotten by time. There I found work with a man named Frank, a car mechanic with grease-stained hands and a kind, weary smile. His garage was a chaotic symphony of clanking metal, the smell of oil, and the hum of worn-out engines. It was a world away from the manicured lawns and disciplined training halls of Hong Kong.
I didn't ask about your past, man. You just looked like you needed a job, so I gave you one.
I swept floors, organized tools, and learned the simple, honest rhythm of manual labor. It was grounding, a new kind of discipline. Frank had a son, a young man named Leo. He was a gentle soul trapped in a body that had become a target for local bullies. He was overweight, shy, and moved with a heavy uncertainty, as if apologizing for the space he occupied. I saw the cruelty he endured firsthand. Teenagers would taunt him, shoving him as he walked home, their laughter cutting deeper than any physical blow. I could see the shame and anger warring within him, a silent storm that had no outlet.
I try to talk to him, Tell him it'll get better, but I don't know how to help.
Watching Leo reminded me so much of my own childhood. I too had been a small, quiet boy, an easy target for those who needed to feel powerful by making others feel small. I remembered the fear, the feeling of helplessness, the way it could shrink your world until it felt like a cage. Bruce had helped me find my own strength, not just in my fists, but in my mind. He taught me that your true opponent is never the person in front of you, but the turmoil inside you. Seeing Leo's struggle reawakened that part of my past and ignited a sense of purpose I hadn't felt since Bruce's death. I began to see a path forward. Perhaps this was the reason my journey had led me here, to this dusty garage, to this troubled young man. I could not bring Bruce back, and I could not change the past. But I could honor his memory by passing on the most important lessons he ever taught me. I could help this boy, not by turning him into a fighter, but by helping him discover the warrior that was already inside him.
He came home with another torn shirt today. I don't know what to do anymore.
I approached Frank one evening after Leo had come home with a torn shirt and tears in his eyes, and I made him an offer. I told him I could teach his son, not just how to defend himself, but how to be strong from the inside out. Our training did not begin with punches or kicks. It began with a conversation. I took Leo to a quiet park, away from the noise of the garage and the prying eyes of his tormentors. I asked him to tell me about his fear, to give it a shape and a name. At first he was hesitant, his eyes fixed on the ground, but I waited, creating a space of patience and acceptance.
I hate it. The way they look at me, the way they laugh. Sometimes I feel like I'm nothing, like I'll never be strong.
I listened without judgment, and then I shared a piece of my own story, of the boy I once was. I wanted him to know he was not alone in his struggle, that his feelings were valid. Our first physical lesson was about balance. I had him stand on one leg not for minutes but for as long as he could hold it, focusing on his breath.
I can't do it.
Don't focus on not falling. Focus on the ground beneath you. Feel it. Be rooted to it. This was our foundation. Before he could learn to strike, he had to learn to stand. He had to learn to be present in his own body, to feel his own center of gravity, to find stability in a world that constantly tried to knock him off balance. This was the first step in reclaiming ownership of himself. We moved on to what Bruce called the straight lead, the core punch of Jeet Kune Do. But I didn't teach it as a weapon. I taught it as an exercise in economy of motion. The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. We spent hours practicing this one simple movement, not against a bag but in the air. The goal was not power, but precision and efficiency. I wanted him to understand that true strength wasn't about wild, angry swings. It was about directness, about simplicity, and about removing all the unnecessary movements that waste energy and create openings. Slowly, a change began to take hold. It wasn't just physical. As Leo's movements became more direct and economical, so did his mindset. He started to hold his head a little higher. He spoke with more clarity. The training was a metaphor for his life. By cutting out wasted motion in his punches, he was learning to cut out the wasted energy of fear and self-doubt. He was learning that he had control, not over others, but over himself. The seed of Bruce's philosophy had been planted. It was a small seed of courage, but I knew with time and care, it would grow into something strong and resilient. One of the most profound lessons Bruce ever shared with me was his philosophy of water. I introduced this concept to Leo not in a training session, but by a flowing creek. We watched the water move around the rocks, effortlessly adapting its shape.
You must be shapeless, formless, like water. When you pour water in a cup, it becomes the cup. When you pour water in a bottle, it becomes the bottle. When you pour water in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Water can drip, and it can crash. Be water, my friend.
Leo looked at the creek, his expression thoughtful, finally understanding that this was about more than just fighting. This philosophy became the cornerstone of our training. When we sparred, I would not let him be rigid. If he tried to block a strike with brute force, I would flow around his block and tap him lightly on the shoulder.
Don't resist, absorb and yield.
He learned to stop meeting force with force. Instead, he started to move with my attacks, redirecting my energy, becoming fluid. This was a monumental shift in his thinking. The bullies he faced were like rocks in the stream, solid, aggressive, and predictable. He was learning how to be the water that flows around them, finding the path of least resistance. Leo's girlfriend, a bright and observant young woman named Clara, often watched our sessions. She was not a target of bullying herself, but she carried her own insecurities. Intrigued, she asked if she could join. I agreed, knowing that Bruce's philosophy was for everyone.
I think I get it. It's like dancing. You have to move with the music, not against it.
Clara grasped the concept of fluidity even faster than Leo. She was a dancer and understood how to move, how to be graceful under pressure. Together they learned to spar not as opponents but as partners, their movements flowing together like a dance. They were learning to read each other's energy, to anticipate, and to adapt in real time. The Be Water principle extended beyond their physical training. It became a tool for navigating their emotional lives. When Leo felt anger rising in response to a taunt, I would remind him,
Be water. Let it flow through you. Don't become the anger.
He learned not to be a rigid container for negative emotions, but a channel through which they could pass without leaving a permanent mark. This was the true art of Jeet Kune Do, the art of liberating oneself from the rigid patterns of thought and emotion that hold us captive. They were not just learning to fight, they were learning how to live. I often told Leo and Clara stories about my time with Bruce. I wanted them to understand the mind of the man behind the art. One of my favorite lessons was about the empty cup. Before I learned the art, Bruce had explained to a student once, a punch was just a punch and a kick was just a kick. After I learned the art, a punch was no longer a punch, a kick no longer a kick. Now that I understand the art, a punch is just a punch and a kick is just a kick. I explained to them that this meant they had to unlearn their preconceived notions. To truly learn, their cups had to be empty. This meant challenging everything they thought they knew about conflict. They believed a fight was about winning, about overpowering an opponent. I taught them that a fight is about communication. Every movement an opponent makes tells you a story about their fear, their anger, their intentions. The goal is not to silence them with force, but to listen to their story so intently that you know what they will do before they do. A wise man can learn more from a foolish question than a fool can learn from a wise answer, I would quote, reminding them to stay humble and open to learning from every situation.
We practice this through sensitivity drills.
Yeah. We would stand facing each other, our forearms touching lightly. One of us would push, and the other's job was not to resist, but to feel the direction of the energy and flow with it, just redirecting it effortlessly.
It was a silent conversation through touch. This drill taught them to abandon their reliance on sight and to trust their instincts. It taught them to be receptive, to feel the subtle shifts in pressure and intention. They were learning to listen with their entire bodies, to empty their minds of the desire to win and instead fill them with pure awareness. This concept of the empty cup transformed their daily interactions.
I stopped seeing my bullies as just mindless aggressors. I started to see the insecurity behind their bravado.
I learned to listen more deeply in my conversations, not just waiting for my turn to speak, but really absorbing what the other person was saying.
They were emptying their cups of ego and assumption, and in doing so, they were able to see the world and the people in it with far greater clarity. They were learning that true mastery is not about accumulating techniques, but about achieving a state of simplicity and directness. The day I knew Leo was ready for a real test came unexpectedly. We were walking through town when his main tormentors, a group of 3 older boys, cornered him in an alley. Their leader, a boy named Mark, shoved Leo hard against the brick wall. In the past, this would have been the moment Leo would either freeze in fear or lash out in blind anger, but this time was different. I stood back, a silent observer, my heart pounding but my face calm. This was his moment, not mine. I had given him the tools, now he had to use them.
I did not raise my fists. I didn't shout back. I just absorbed the shove, my body pliant like the water we had studied. I looked at Mark, and I wasn't afraid or angry. I just focused, calmly.
He held Mark's gaze, and in that moment, the power dynamic shifted. The bullies were expecting a reaction. Fear, anger, tears, something to feed their own egos. Leo gave them nothing. He gave them stillness. He was a calm sea in the middle of their manufactured storm, and it unnerved them. They did not know how to react to someone who would not play their game.
Mark shoved me again, harder this time. He snarled, "What's wrong with you? Fight back!"
Leo simply adjusted his footing, maintaining his balance. He remembered my words, echoing Bruce's own. The stillness in stillness is not the real stillness. Only when there is stillness in movement does the universal rhythm manifest. He was not frozen, he was actively still. He was observing, reading their body language, their tense shoulders, their shallow breathing. He could see their frustration mounting, their cheap power play failing to produce the desired effect. They were becoming more agitated, more predictable.
Finally, Mark threw a wild, clumsy punch. That was the moment I'd been waiting for, but I didn't counter with a big blow. Instead, I used minimal motion, just like you taught me. I intercepted the punch, redirected it past my head, and used my other hand to push Mark off balance.
The bully stumbled backward, surprised and confused, landing awkwardly on the ground. His friends hesitated, their bravado gone. Leo had not won in the traditional sense. He had simply refused to participate in the conflict on their terms. He stood his ground, calm and centered, and the bullies, stripped of their power, simply turned and walked away. The incident in the alley was a turning point. Leo and Clara both understood that the greatest victory had been won before a single punch was thrown. It was a victory of the mind. Leo had become, in that moment, untouchable. Not because he was a perfect fighter, but because his emotional state could not be manipulated by his opponents. Their taunts and shoves could not touch his inner calm. This was the hidden legacy of Bruce Lee, the part that went far beyond the spectacular kicks and the one-inch punch. It was the art of mastering oneself. Bruce always said, "The successful warrior is the average man with laser-like focus." This is what I had tried to instill in them. True power wasn't about being the strongest or the fastest. It was about controlling your own attention, about placing your focus where you choose, rather than letting it be hijacked by fear or anger. When the bullies tried to provoke Leo, they were trying to steal his focus. By remaining calm and centered, he kept his focus for himself. He controlled the one thing he could truly own, his own state of mind. This made him the master of the situation.
I applied this lesson in my own way. I faced a different kind of opponent, a teacher who constantly belittled me in class. Instead of shrinking or getting defensive, I started to use the same principles. I would listen to the criticism, stay calm, and respond with thoughtful, well-reasoned questions. I refused to let the teacher's negativity disrupt my inner peace.
Her calm confidence not only earned her the respect of her classmates but also seemed to disarm the teacher, whose barbs lost their power when they failed to find a reaction. She, too, had become untouchable.
Our confidence really blossomed. We walked with a new sense of purpose, not with arrogance, but with quiet self-assurance. We learned that we didn't need anyone's approval to feel worthy.
Yeah, we discovered that our strength came from within, from our ability to stay calm, control our emotions, and really understand the motivations of others.
They had faced real opponents and learned that the ultimate defense was not a block or a strike, but an unwavering and untouchable mind. They were living proof that Bruce's philosophy was a path to personal freedom. Years have passed since I first arrived in this dusty town. Frank's garage is still here, a little older, a little more worn, but still a place of honest work. Leo is now a confident young man, studying to become a counselor, hoping to help other kids who face the same struggles he did. Clara is pursuing her passion for dance, her movements filled with a grace and power that reflect her inner strength. They no longer need me as a teacher, for the lessons are now a part of them. They are the living, breathing embodiment of Bruce's most profound teachings.
Sometimes I think about how much has changed. I used to feel so small, but now I want to help others find their own strength.
And I dance with a freedom I never thought possible. Every step reminds me of what I learned, not just about movement, but about life.
I often think about the disagreements I had with Bruce's family back in Hong Kong. I see now that we were all trying to honor him in our own way. They sought to preserve the legend, the powerful image of the dragon that inspired the world. I sought to preserve the quiet wisdom of the man, the philosopher who taught me how to be free. Perhaps both are necessary. The world needs symbols of strength, but it also needs practical paths to self-discovery. I found my path not by building a monument, but by planting a seed in a place no one was looking. My journey has been one of transformation, just as much as it has been for Leo and Clara. I left Hong Kong filled with grief and a sense of loss. I walked through a desert, both literal and metaphorical, and in a small, forgotten corner of America I found a new family and a new purpose. I did not just teach, I learned. I learned that a legacy is not a static thing to be guarded, but a living energy to be shared. It is an echo that can travel across oceans and decades, finding new voices to give it life. I'm an old man now. My own time for fighting is long past. But every time I see Leo help someone with a kind word or see Clara move with fearless confidence, I see Bruce. I see his spirit, his intellect, his profound humanity. He is not gone. He is here, in their courage, in their compassion, in their untouchable minds. The dragon's echo is still resounding, not in the noise of a movie screen, but in the quiet strength of a transformed life. And for that, my friend, I will be forever grateful. My cup is no longer empty, it is full.